6, which is the adoption of committee resolutions. 6.1 is the adoption of committee resolutions for the investment committee of the 20th of November. Which is on page 16.
And I'm happy to move the minutes, and the substantial thing that we did then was set up the interview panel. So I'll perhaps give a wee report on that, which says we had 16 talented applicants for the jobs on the investment committee, a couple of efforts, and we narrowed that down to a short list of 5, and we'll conclude those interviews today. The investment committee's meeting on the 25th of February, when we will report our recommendations to that committee, and then subsequently the sign off for that will be the council meeting on the 12th of March, when everybody will get to approve where we're at.
Thank you, Eric. Seconded by Jeremy. Any discussion? I will put the motion. Resolution. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
6.2, the adoption of committee resolutions for the risk and assurance committee meeting of the 11th of December. Lyndall.
Thanks, Chairman. I just wanted to maybe clarify 9.5, the long-term plan learnings, which is a word I wouldn't normally use myself. The paragraph 2 that says the committee highlighted a concern that the process did not enable the identification or noting of matters which may be factually incorrect. I'm just wondering if it's clear enough that we meant in the submissions. Is that what we meant? That some of the things, facts in the submissions were potentially incorrect, rather than the information that had come from council or staff. So is there a way we can just make that more clear? It'd be helpful.
They can be updated when the committee gets to consider them for adoption.
Yeah, could we check
I'd
that depending on the rest of the councillors feel that it's more clear?
I think that's a good point, and it sounds like we can tidy that up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to move that, Chairman.
Happy to move. Seconded for that. Move by Phil. All in favour say aye. We can go to adoption of committee resolutions for strategy and policy meeting of the 12th of December. Linda, would you like to comment on that?
I need to highlight the, I guess 10.2. Once again, the Government Policy and Legislation Monitor was a multi-page statement of the many, many things that are on the go being handed to us from central government. So apart from that, I would...
and then be fixing up some typos.
Oh, yes, there are a few. Happy to move those, Chairman.
Move by Lyndall, seconded for that. Alistair, any further discussion? I will put the resolution. All in favour say aye. Aye. Okay, item 7 is notification of extraordinary items of urgent business. Oh, no, that's questions, isn't it? So we'll now move to item 8, which is questions, and we have a question from Councillor Morrison. Would you like to put the question?
Yeah, so there was a series of 4 questions. They relate to the investigation of suspected wetland loss and the subsequent enforcement action of suspected wetland loss. And I know that it's probably an issue of public interest because there has been some discussion around this in social media and media in recent months. And Southland has been a national leader in the number of wetlands lost since the 90s. And so it was really around just making sure or testing what is it that we've learned in recent years from this in this area.
Thank you. So it's fair to say that the case law is evolving within the space, and there has been a recent High Court decision which has challenged, thanks Darren, I'm also bringing Dr. Darren Sutherland along for any science questions because it is about the science in this case. So the recent Court of Appeal decision has meant that, and the court accepted an argument that evidence of wetland adapted animals is required in the criminal enforcement setting, which ties in with the definition within our plans, but also which is sourced from the definition in the RMA, which speaks to plants and animals adapted to wet conditions. So we're having to do a piece of work about what that means for both our investigations and also then through into enforcement proceedings. Because there are some challenges within the resourcing space that there is not much, there aren't very many experts in wetland adapted animal space, and so we need to work out how we flow that through into our processes. The other thing that we have learned is that we need to ensure that all considerations are made when investigating and obtaining that evidence, and so we are now using our science team much more, and in specific our wetland scientists as early as possible in the investigation and have them on site with us during the investigation to ensure that all relevant matters are recorded and documented appropriately. We have locally investigated a small number of wetland complaints, and the outcome of those to date has been that the land was wet, but it was not a true wetland. And in terms of, in those small number of cases, the offending was considered low to medium, and the outcome was an infringement notice. We are also now undertaking work to look at ensuring that we are consistent in our investigation methodology, and we're developing a guideline tool for officers to assist in investigations where suspected wetland loss is occurring. We do rely on our community, obviously, to report suspected wetland loss, and so in turn, I've been working with Sam to ensure that the work that he's leading in the wetland space, that's a core platform with respect to how we communicate, raise that awareness and level of knowledge around the importance of wetlands within the environment. We have also trained and highlighted to Environment Southland staff so that when they are out in the field, they are able to identify and report suspected wetland loss. And we will be investigating the use of other tools to identify it, for example, through AI. So Sentinel regularly capture high quality satellite imagery, and so there is the potential to use AI to identify where wetland loss may be occurring for further on the ground investigation. There is a question that we do also need to answer, coming back to the expertise point, is that we do need to understand a bit more about the scale of wetland loss where we may need to use an expert in wet-adapted animals alongside our own in-house expertise with regards to plant species.
Thanks for that. I've got Robert, Jeremy and Alistair. Robert.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple of questions, sciencey perhaps. The first being, are birds regarded as animals of the wetlands, given that they come and go?
Birds are considered wet adapted animals. It depends on the bird species, obviously. Like waterfowl, for instance, would certainly be considered wet adapted species. You are right though, in terms of coming and going. That is a perennial problem in that just because you have a wet adapted species present in an area, that doesn't convey a wetland status. But if you're in combination with other like wetland vegetation, wetland hydrology and soil. If you had like waterfowl present, then that would certainly tick the box in terms of it, there being well adapted animals there.
Okay, thanks. And my second question is regarding ephemeral wetlands. Are they counted in your in the tally of of the number of wetlands in Southland, or are they disregarded because they're ephemeral?
In terms of ephemeral wetlands, they're considered one of the 9 wetland types, and they are certainly counted in our wetland tally, and we do have ephemeral wetlands identified. In saying that, ephemeral wetlands are probably the most difficult wetland type to identify, just because they do tend to be quite small, so they might not meet the area size in terms of the mapping. Also, they're just quite difficult to determine. There has been some work done, for instance, by I think it was MFE recently, where they've given us guidance on how to do how to identify ephemeral wetlands, and they're also using some sort of satellite imagery with some AI tool to be able to kind of like help kind of like try and pinpoint where ephemeral wetlands are. For the most part, they do tend to be small ponds that dry out over summer. So if you can identify identify that, then that goes a long way into trying to determine.
Thanks. Could I just throw in a supplementary quick one? The animals that are used as indicators, are they native only, or are they also exotics?
There's in all of the wetland determinations, there's no you don't have to differentiate between native and exotic. That also goes for wetland plants too. An exotic wetland plant would trigger the rules just as much as a native plant. So would an exotic animal.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just, did I hear right that there were some infringements in regards, they weren't wetlands, but they were wet areas? Was that? I was just saying that they were identified, they weren't wetlands, but they were wet areas, and they were issued infringement notices.
Through you, Chair.
Is that-
Sorry,
can I get
just,
the-
no,
can I clarify that?
perhaps
Sorry.
misspoke. To clarify,
Okay.
the outcome of most of the investigations was that the land was wet, but not a true wetland. In the few cases that were determined to be a true wetland, the offending was low to medium, and the outcome was an infringement.
Okay, so if they were wet areas and someone's done a bit of drain, they may not have, it was permitted, I suppose. Okay, that's all.
Alistair.
I did note in through you, Mr. Chair. I did note in reading this paper that it was all based on losses. Now, and you also did say that when your staff are out there, they're identifying lost wetlands. Well, really, I would like to see a figure come out as to what we're gaining. And the gaining of the wetlands now, presumably with the technology we've got, is going to be more efficient. They may be smaller, but there's any work going on in that.
Through you, Chair. Certainly the technology that I spoke about can be used to identify areas that we're gaining wetlands alongside wetlands that are to be lost, or are being potentially lost, and would allow us to investigate. In terms of the work program, I think that's going to be the subject of we're going to bring to council shortly on the 19th, but I will hand over to my colleague Rachel.
Yes, through you, Chair, just a note that there was a report that went through to strategy and policy last year that gave the latest information about wetland creation as well as in restoration, as well as loss figures. And perhaps what we can undertake to do is at some point this year to bring a revised update through to you so you can see those figures, but I'm happy to recirculate the report from last year as well.
Because we want some good news.
John, then myself.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. Probably Rachel wants to state this one too, please. So a question around, we've got staff out training, trying to visually see wetlands. We've got LiDAR sitting there. Are we going as far as supporting staff to identify wetlands that could be enhanced and how that could be fast-tracked and supported well for the community? We've got plenty of examples that want to happen. I would challenge Al's calculation on gaining versus losses. I think we're in a challenging space environmentally. So how do we identify the easy wins, and then how do we make sure that whilst we've got regulation to penalise against draining wetlands, how do we stop regulation in the road of enhancing wetlands? That's the key. It's enhancing. We don't need to be trying to build a wetland on top of a hill. There's a lot of opportunity with wetlands we've got of enhancement. We've got the technology, we've got the expertise. How do we put that together?
Actually wondering whether Karen, as chief scientist, would like to come and talk about the catchment science summaries and some of the other things that link to this space.
So thank you through Mr. Chair. Just to answer your question, so Darren is working on a prioritisation report at the moment. So following on from that previous report that looked at wetland loss and gain, he is now looking at which wetlands we should strategically focus on for different purposes as well. So that report is due to come through in the next few months. Which is intended to help with some of those decisions.
Okay. And if community come to us with a suggestion, are we able to feed that through and maybe not let it get lost in the report, I suppose, is my concern.
Yes, so we are trying to do it in a I guess structured, systematic way, but absolutely that can come through and can be considered.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. And I guess we had a discussion earlier about how can we incentivise the creation of wetlands, and the discussion was, are the regulatory barriers that we can get around? I think we probably have the ability to at least do some wetlands as permitted activity, and at the moment that is quite a disincentive, and I think council we're all pretty united, and let's find a way around this, because it was one of the key regional forum bits of advice was the creation of wetlands. And as soon as we put a value on, make them easy to do, I think we can make some real progress. Morris, Peter, then Phil. Morris.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask about the situation with wetlands and resource consents. We've got the resource consent for the wind farm in Wyndham, where there's a potential loss of wetlands there. And I was involved in a resource consent recently where wetland loss was an issue, but council staff weren't directly involved in that. And in the consent that I was involved with, consultants were employed, and their view was that wetlands in this case some were being protected, but others were not. And in the case of the wind farm, council are there as advisors, but can't say yay or nay. And it's a bit of a similar situation with resource consents, where the consent procedure is given to independent commissioners and consultants who are not council staff. So my question really is, how can we be sure that we are protecting wetlands in these situations where the council control has been lost to some extent?
Might get Lisa to answer that through you, Chair.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the intention through the consent process is to not effectively lose council control. Consents internally often where our science capacity isn't able to accommodate feeding and expertise on the particular matter, they are approached in the first instance and sought for guidance in terms of what ES themselves for our plan seeks to achieve. So it provides us guidance along the way to ensure that our question to other experts outside of the building is going to achieve what we are trying to actually achieve. So they're not left, we don't ignore our own science or expertise in the building. The idea is to incorporate them, much like some other, not just wetlands, but other factors. And often our own science team is pointing us to or recommending the certain experts that we do use as well.
I've got Peter, then Phil, and that might be about the end of the questions. Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just want to pick up on that question. I don't think there's really any clarity of what our role is. I said enormous amount of science being generated coming through in the papers. Fantastic. I think we've got that expertise within the building, regulatory and so forth. But I was under the understanding that we are essentially outsourcing the wetland work to Thriving Southland and other organisations. We're seeing community groups getting involved. What is our involvement in it? Have we got a place for all that excellent work that's been generated within this building to land? I'm not really quite too sure that everything is quite linked up in a structured way that I can actually understand. I'd hate to see our work and our people getting bypassed in these community groups. I'd like to see that we do have some involvement there. So I just need to explain to me. I can't really quite see the clear pathway here. So if someone could do that while we're having this discussion, it'd be great.
Sure. Rachel's walking to the table to lead you through that. I'm looking to answer as well.
So through you, Chair, just to clarify, there was the 238,000 that went through to Thriving Southland last year, which wetland creation is definitely one of the activities that that fund is providing for. We've got also funding internally for similar activities, and our land sustainability team are working with individuals whilst the Thriving efforts are focused with catchment groups. So all of this is sitting in our broader wetlands program, which we're bringing to you on the strategy day that's coming up, so that you can see how the different pieces fit together. So there'll be an opportunity for further discussion at that point.
So can you just follow up to that? So you can assure us that we're not going to be working in parallel with the community. We're going to come together, aren't we?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of discussion. Sam and I have been working along with members of our teams with Thriving and trying to make sure the pieces do fit together on the other statements.
Thank you.
Phil.
Thank you. The focus of this question very much focused on wetland losses as opposed to restoration or reconstruction of wetlands, on the basis that economically it must make so much more sense to protect and preserve what we've got rather than spending 10 times the amount to re-establish wetlands that have been lost. I guess my question was the presence of wetland adapted animals. If you're investigating after the effect, after the wetland is lost, I'm assuming many of those animals would have packed up their equivalent of their suitcases and moved on to more favourable locations. So how challenging is it to verify this was indeed a wetland that was lost if after the effect there's no remaining wetland affected animals, or is there a means to establish that it was previously animals?
Mr. Chair, you raise a good point, and unfortunately you are correct that once a wetland has been lost, that the animals will probably, as you say, pack up and leave. So therefore, and that's also a challenge also with not only with animals but also plants as well. It's like if you're presented with pasture, you might be able to detect the wetland soil. Maybe there might be some signature of the wetland soils remaining, providing it hasn't been converted into pasture for too long, depending on what the wetland soils were. But as for the animals, there's no guarantee that the wetland animals would be there. That's not also just in terms of like barriers, but also just I think a focus on the wetland animals. The easiest to sample would actually just be the soil invertebrates, and that's probably going to be the main target of the formal surveys And I'd imagine that community would change fairly rapidly if drainage in those soils would change.
I've always had power over significant wetlands, but obviously we still have tools over any wetlands to react, and okay, it might be after the fact. It's pretty gutting to see what's happened down on the Awaroa wetland again this year, and I suspect that was deliberately lit. So we do have some challenges. Yeah, we'll move on. Questions with councillors and councillors' reports. I haven't got a written report because we're just at the start of the year, but I think one of the good news things was to have clarification that the ability for gravel to be removed under structures has been clarified. So we've got the owners of those structures who can actually do that maintenance without going through a consent process, which is good news. Happy to answer any questions on anything that I've attended that's on that list. And if there's no, Morris.
Yes, I just got my written report there, Mr. Chairman, just to go over about the Waioa Working Party and its meeting last year and its recommendations to the council.
Are we all listening?
I'm just waiting to, so hopefully everybody is listening and has read this, Mr. Chairman. I know it's rather a detailed report, but I did want to go into the history of the Waioa Working Party because we do have a tendency, in my view, in this council to forget about things that have happened in the past. And it's important to know what's happened then so that our decisions now, are cognizant of that. So the Waioa Working Party has a long history, Mr. Chairman. It was formed in the 1990s to study the effects of hydroelectric power on the Waioa catchment, and it was instrumental in setting conditions for the current resource consents. It was also part of the organisation that set up the various trusts, the Waioa Trust and the other trusts that were established and are still going on now to try and compensate for some of the adverse effects that the power scheme has caused. Early on in 1996, there were members from a wide range of organisations, the District Council, DOC, Forest and Bird Fish and Game Conservation Board, Jet Boaters, Lakes Guardians. But now the group is smaller now than what it was. We still do have Fish and Game, the Waioa Catchment Committee, which is good, the Guardians of the Lakes and Forest and Bird. The Waioa Trust and Environment Southland currently services the group. So we do invite iwi and the Department of Conservation, but they rarely attend, unfortunately. We only have one meeting a year when Meridian presents all its reports, its monitoring reports that it's been doing over the year to the group. And over the last 13 years, a large amount of information has been gathered. And this is very impressive, actually. The work has been mainly done by NIWA scientists, and I want to make a special mention to Kathy Kilroy, who is one of the world's leading periphyton scientists, and she's retired from the group now, but her work through that period right from the start, and when Dirimo got established in the Waioa, learning how to manage it with the flushing flows and when to provide those and what kind of flow it should be is very impressive, and it's a very impressive database on managing the river in that particular situation. We've got six recommendations there, so going back a little, the Waioa Working Party has been it's not a committee of Environment Southland, but it was a committee that was set up to provide recommendations to the council on what's been happening in the previous year, so that hopefully the council can look at these recommendations and take note of them and take some action in relation to them. And now we have a good relationship with Rachel, the council staff, so that we're hopeful that our recommendations are actually taken seriously and looked into, and I'm sure they will be. There's 6 recommendations there. One of the most important ones is the second one, about the flushing flow in the Waia River upstream of the lake control structure. There is a risk there, and we heard recently, actually not here, but just over the hill in Milford Sound, where there was a plankton bloom, a phytoplankton bloom, and it caused some issues. It wasn't toxic, fortunately, but the same sort of thing could happen in the Waia River between the Manapouri Lake Control Structure and Pearl Harbor, which used to be the Waia River, but now, in practical terms, it's part of the lake. So it's a very still body of water, and unless there's a movement of water through there at times like this, when the flows are low, there's a risk that phytoplankton blooms could occur there, and they could potentially be toxic and cause problems. So it's very important that that is managed well, and there's a recommendation there that we believe should be adopted. There's also an issue with the blue-green algae. Now it's called microcoleus. Blue-green algae, as you know, usually is toxic and it can cause problems. We get lots of warnings from the council about this. And we think that there should be a flushing flow regime that takes this into account, and when microcoleus builds up, a flushing flow should be provided to reduce this. But we're hoping that a program can be developed this year so that next year that can be put in place. Possibly Meridian won't be too keen on that, but we think that should be investigated, because that microcoleus, the blue-green algae, is an important issue, and it's important because people use the river for swimming at this time of the year, for example. So that's really necessary to fix that. The other main thing that we're thankful for the council to involve the Waia Working Party with is the NREI study. NREI stands for Net Rate of Energy Intake, and it's a measure of the needs of the organisms that live in a river for the amount of water that needs to be in the river flowing down for their survival and for them to thrive. It's not a measure of the attractiveness of the river from an aesthetic point of view or anything else. It simply measures the amount of flow that is needed to supply an ideal environment for the animals that live there. And fortunately or unfortunately, most native fish don't require that much water. The Waia River in its natural state was a very big river, the second largest river in New Zealand after the Clutha River. So the NREI study, the early outputs or findings from it suggest that actually quite a low flow will suit most of the, especially the native fish there, not so much the trout because they survive in a higher flow, and some macroinvertebrates, the stream insects that live in the river, need a higher flow as well. However, we do think that doing the study on the Waia in its present state, what was done down below Tuatapere, where it's a very low river, most of the flow has been taken away, won't give you a full picture of what an ideal situation would be there. So we're suggesting that an NREI study of the upper Waia between Lake Te Anau and Lake Manapouri might be useful to give us information about what would be an ideal situation for the organisms that live there compared to what its natural flow was. I'm not sure whether that's right or not, but we certainly hope that we can look at that and see whether or not that would be a good idea. So I'm sorry for that, Mr. Chairman, but I thought it needed a bit of extra explaining. And so overall, I think the Waia Working Party's relationship with the council now is quite good. In the past, it was a little bit poorer, but I know that we've been involved in the NREI study, looking at sites where it should go, and I think that the interim results are going to be presented to the Waia Working Party, as they will be to this council in its time. So thank you.
Thank you, Morris, for that very comprehensive report. I've got a number of questions. Little, if you're related to that.
Yes, thank you.
Little, Alistair, then me.
Two parts, if I could, please. First, a process question as far as these recommendations, what happens to them next? In response to Morris, councillor Rodway's question.
I have, a letter has been written to the council, to Rachel. Yeah. She has replied with an interim reply saying that they will be looked at, so.
Yeah, so it's the looking at part of that I'm just wanted clarification on, so that we know they don't disappear into the.
Thank you, thanks for that question.
Rachel might like to elaborate on that.
Wire.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the letter came in from the Waia Working Party just before Christmas, and actually there are a number of moving pieces in the Waia space. So in addition to the net ratio of energy intake study that's currently underway, there's a range of pieces in play, and we've got a meeting this afternoon actually just to look at where all those pieces are at, and we are looking at a briefing or workshop with yourselves, sessions with multiple parties actually over the coming months, just to give an update on where different things are at and confirm the work program for the next few years. So there will be a formal response to the Waia Working Party, but you will also be involved in discussions in the near future on this.
Okay, thank you. The second part is just I'm aware that the lake control structure has just had a new consent issued for the work that they're going to do there. So I just wanted to ask whether any of these recommendations would be in line with that, doubling up any of that, or a completely different area of the river. Just wanted to check that new consent.
Not particularly.
Because there was a lot of discussion about flushing flows and measuring and what measuring was going to be done already. So I just wanted to check we were going to.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, not to my knowledge, they wouldn't be related to the works for the specific improvement project that was occurring, but rather I think separate to the original, as well as they are more focused on lower.
Sorry, say it
The
again.
1996 consents focused on downward from the structure. Flushing flow.
Well, it affects all the discharge
Yep.
dams and everything, of course, but
So
yeah,
it'd be a
the
separate
one thing where there's a little bit of an overlap is that second bullet point, which is about the trigger for the flushing flow. There is a condition on the new consent which requires them to to discharge water if the chlorophyll A measurement gets over 5 milligrams per cubic metre in any one of those, or in that new channel. So that's sort of related to that, but this program here has sampling sites in 3 different places throughout the river, one near the MLC, one halfway up, and one up near Home Creek. So what we are saying is that if a periphyton bloom is starting to occur, and that's measured by the amount of chlorophyll that's there, then a flushing flow should occur then, not just if it occurs in the new channel. So a little bit more stringent.
Rachel's comment about the workshop, I guess that'll come out then. Thanks, Lacey.
Alistair.
You correct me if I'm wrong, Morris, because I am sometimes. The work that's being done above the lake control structure, as I understood it on the day, was meant to be done so that you could flush more often or at lower levels.
Yeah.
Is that going to help the system?
Yes.
That's why it's done.
That's the intention, that's right. In the past, or at the moment, the flows required to remove DMO at low lake levels, which is now, could only be delivered about 30% of the time. But with the new channel, it's estimated, Meridian estimates that that flow should be able to be delivered about 70% of the time. So it's not a foolproof, but it's going to be better than the current situation. I should say about that, the Meridian have asked for that, the construction of that to occur not this year, but next year. So they're not going to start the work until next year now rather than this year. For various operational reasons, turbines being out and other problems. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Well,
sorry,
thank you.
just to reconfirm with Morris, the sill height for the Manapouri Lake structure is not changing.
That's correct.
So
That's right.
So thanks for that comprehensive report. I think, over the years, there's been a lot of discussion with people in the lower Wyle about the timing and the number of flushing flows, and that will continue. Must note that after the 2000 Cumex, the river is looking very good visually. That flushing event has cleaned things out quite a bit, and you can look over the bridge and see, beautifully clean water. So there's probably some learnings there. I've always been a little bit puzzled that the Whale Working Group is actually controlled by the consent holder, which to me has always been unusual, but I'm sure they do good science, but something that may well come up in a future reconsenting process. So thanks. Any other reports?
Just finally, Mr. Chairman, I didn't mention before, the last paragraph of my report there is about, you mentioned this just then. As part of their 1996 consent, they have to, or 2010, they're not changed one, they have to do a geomorphological survey of the river when after there's been a flow of 2000 cubics or more. And that occurred in November 2023. It was only just over 2000, about 2020 cubics they calculated it to be. So that, we were a bit disappointed that that hasn't been done to date, but Meridian have advised that they will be doing that this year. So that's more about where the gravel lies, whether the gravel's building up or not, and that will be of interest to the people in the our catchment group, I'd imagine in particular.
Thanks for that, Morris. Any other reports? No. Well,
Just a very quick report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The City Council invited us councillors to meet the Tuatara and the Kumagaya contingent yesterday afternoon. And when I arrived, I found that I was the only old Tuatara there. There were no animals, no Japanese people, and no city councillors. But I'd missed the note that it had been cancelled. Just saying.
Sorry to hear that.
Can I just pop on that it was cancelled because the Kumagaya visitors' planes were delayed and they didn't get into Wakefield.
That's right, that's correct.
There's at least one old relic there anyway.
Exactly.
You've escaped. Careful.
Yeah, that's right.
Any further reports? Enough, we will move to item 10. I see we have the LGNZ. Is that just a note in Jan, or is it?
Yes, they send them out quarterly and they're always opinions and we'll share an opportunity to respond to them.
Right, 10.1 is the Chief Executive report. Would you like to comment on your comprehensive report?
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors. This report covers the period in the lead up to the end of last year and then across the summer period where we have information, particularly in the science area, about the very busy summer monitoring program that we have. The council work program continues apace over the summer, and there's quite a number of matters that have come up in that science space. If you are wanting any further information, we have staff here to answer your questions. There's also, now that we're into the sort of new year of work, there are matters now that are immediately before the council. The Local Government Commission is holding a hearing next week with us in regard to some appeals in relation to the representation review decisions from last year. So that's a piece of work that we will be sitting down to next Wednesday. Further into the document, there's some reasonably comprehensive notes on where we're at, as I say, with the science program, with the data that's going through there, but also where we are with our discussions with the community about our annual plan process and the rating review that was foreshadowed in the LTP to be discussed this year. So there's the communications team are leading the work of being out in the community at the moment across the summer show period, and so consulting with the community at that point, and also leading into a more formal consultation process around those matters once council's discussed the paper that's in their pack today. There's also an update on where the catchment operations team is doing its work, both with the recent government funding for this financial year in relation to flood resilience projects. So that's covered in this particular focus on the work in the Aparima and the Ureti. There's also an update across the broader biosecurity and biodiversity operations programs, both in relation to the marine space, but also the pest plant update that's in here as well. There is the rest of the corporate end of the organisation also reports in this report, councillor. So if you're interested in discussing any of the matters that are in here, very happy to take questions. There's a full cohort of general managers and their staff are waiting to answer your questions.
Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This one was just quite interested in page Ureti Flood Resilience Project, bottom of page 63, then on to 64. Quite a bit of interest in my local community over this work, quite a report taking place. Doesn't seem to be at this stage any clarity. You've outlined some here of how the project will commence, in what areas, and the priorities for that. So that's the questions that are going around the community. And once this work is done, what level of protection would be afforded to the context of that is Wellington, as we know, well, if we do not know or not know, they want to expand, the community wants to expand. We have to be really careful, I think, on how we communicate that level of protection and be very clear around that. So people wanting to know, they're very interested. When are we going to have a set of proposals like a business plan to work forward with that will give people some understanding?
Sure. Lucy's coming forward to information on that.
There was a question in there.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I believe Randall's online as well, so he might jump in as well and add to what my answer will be. So quickly on the Ureti work. So in terms of when the work's likely to start, at the moment we're doing the flood modelling piece to scope up what the scale of change might need to look like. So that's going to build on the PGF funded terrestrial LiDAR that we did, but it's a slightly different form of modelling. So it's the bathymetric LiDAR that we need that does the underwater element. In terms of the design work that will then follow that modelling, that will need to include obviously community conversations and consultation, but also some technical inputs as well to figure out exactly where and how the interventions will be undertaken. As it says in the report, the intention for the work is that it will span over the next 3 years. That's kind of next 3 construction seasons. But at this point, we've done the preparatory steps, and then the next two stages are actually modelling and figuring out what the design work looks like. In terms of what the intention is, I think you asked the question about the level of protection. So in terms of what the work is intended to do, it's to ensure that the defects that we are aware of in that space and that the design standard of the flood banks is ensured. It's not going to give a higher level of protection. It's making sure that those stop banks are actually going to do what they were designed to do and have obviously been in place for quite some time. So it's making sure that we've got the levels of protection as they were designed. So that's the intent, but there'll be a lot more work to come and a lot more conversations about what the design needs to look like.
Could I ask, will we be giving a specification, a direct specification to the community of what that level will come to, so people can make really clear decisions, whoever they might be?
So
it's just expectations we need to probably get hold of at this point in time of what we are in fact doing.
So through you, Chair, the levels of service articulated for our different kinds of flood banks across the region. So there's different levels of service for our rural banks compared to our urban banks. So through the stretch of the Arete, there's obviously different specifications for different parts. As part of the work that we need to be undertaking, the broader floodplain management approach work, that will need to be part of what we communicate and how we communicate. We need people to understand what the level of protection actually is, and that the flood banks are there to protect them, but it won't stop everything. And so that's part of the broader conversation around how do we slow things down further up and do that.
Morris.
Sort of relates to that thing. I had 4 questions, Mr. Chairman. One of them relates to this. This is on page 23 that Peter was talking about. Slightly different though. I note there that underneath the Epirima Flood Resilience Project, the second line, and in other places as well, and the report talks about improving hydraulic efficiency, which makes me a little bit worried because hydraulic efficiency increases the speed of the flow, and there's a potential then to increase erosion and risk of communities further downstream. And seems also to be contrary to our slow the flow concept and method. So I hope that it is all, and I think you sort of explained this, Lucy, that it is all part of a big plan, but we don't want to really increase hydraulic efficiency. We want to reduce hydraulic efficiency so that the water can be slowed down and not arrive at a town like a Tautau all at once. I might be being a little bit pedantic there, but I think the words hydraulic efficiency are a little bit worrying in this context.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair, I'd just note that we have a lot of tools in the toolbox, and we've got lots of stretches of rivers that have different requirements. And what we're trying to create is a shift towards a more catchment-focused approach from the mountainside to the sea. And a lot of the slow the flow work will give us more tools and will enable us to make different choices about how we apply them through the whole of the catchments. I think the hydraulic efficiency and the flood carrying capacity terminology would be what we have historically used, and that certainly needs to still be a component of how we manage our rivers for the foreseeable, whilst we're building that resilience, more mountains to sea approach. So I think it's still part of the lingo, and it will be for a little while, but we are transitioning to and thinking about how we need to transition different parts of our catchment differently. So yeah, they need to be layered together as opposed to one or the other.
Thank you.
I've got Eric, then Lyndall, then me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I comment about on biosecurity from page 65, and I note a couple of lines about a plant called Carrots. Do we know where this came from? And let me tell you why. Mario Philomacoticum, as it's known, was found only in the tributaries of the Amazon. That was 100 years ago. It's now worldwide. It's been spread largely through garden shops. There are a number of examples in New Zealand, Hyraceum being another one that was introduced as a ground cover for rockeries. So what are we doing about monitoring what the commercial activity or people seeing something and harvesting some seeds and secreting them into use in there for their own edification?
Through your Chair, I'm going to let Jolie answer this one from our biosecurity. Morning, Councillor and Chair. Yeah, so I guess there was a couple of questions in there. So the parrot's feather was in a pond, a private landowner's pond, that had obviously been brought in there many years ago when they could buy it from nurseries and stuff and put into the pond. So it's now been eliminated, and that is only known site in Southland. But of course we need to keep looking. How we're monitoring what plants and that are being sold around, we have the National Pest Plant Accord. So through MPI, there's a long list of plants that are actually banned to be sold in New Zealand. We are going actively around nurseries and kind of some of the backyard dealerships that we're kind of finding, and making sure that those plants aren't being sold, as well as any of our regional pest management plan plants. but unfortunately that list is not as long as we probably want it to be, and people do still trade through backyards, just sharing plants and bits and pieces, which is something that we can't really stop too much of. But yeah, we want to at least monitor the normal ways that people would get a hold of these plants and do as much publicity as we can on some of the other ones that are there.
Thank you.
Answer that.
It's a very pretty plant.
Yes, it is. But we don't want it down here, and definitely not in the wild.
Thank you. That's most encouraging.
Lyndall.
That was one of my questions actually, but I was also going to say congratulations on getting rid of it. That's what we want. Two other things, Chairman. On page 59, there's an air and terrestrial sciences paragraph. Of course, there's no mention of air. I'm just wondering if somebody can tell me where we're at with the NESAC. Are we expecting some kind of National Environmental Standard for Air Quality still, or are this just we're staying with what we've got? Is that something that they're going, central government are going to throw at us in the mix in anytime soon?
So through you, Chair, staff have a slide which we intend to show at the workshop after this meeting, which is of the 21 pieces of national direction. And I am sad to report that the national standards around equality are not on that list. They're conspicuous by their absence, and we did ask at a meeting with MFE, where some of the regional sector secretaries were present, what the intentions were, and it's not on the list, basically, was the question.
One of the reasons I'm asking, if I can indulge me, Chairman, I was watching something in the holidays, and some of the beauty products that are now being sold in parts of the Asian continent actually not only have SPF factors, they have PM factors built into them. So some of it has PM 2.5 resistance or whatever in the beauty products. So just brought it to the front of my mind, and I kind of went, oh, that's weird, but yeah, so it's still current. Thanks. And the other question is about the cruise ship numbers, and just I couldn't remember whether those numbers were fewer than we were in previous years. The expected numbers were fewer. I thought I remembered, but
I'll ask Mike to comment on that.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The expected numbers are still on the decline. In comparison to last season, we had approximately 135 odd vessels that were on the books to come through Fiordland. This year it's only 85, and next year currently we're sitting in the 60s, sort of mid-60s. We think that after discussions with the various cruise companies, but also NZ Cruise Association, that this is going to be probably the limits we're going to see. We'll most likely see a 3-season cycle. That's how far in advance the cruise ships normally book cabins, etc. Now, for quite a number of reasons, they've decided that New Zealand is high risk with no reward, and that's through rising port costs, what's going on in the Red Sea, biofouling restrictions as well, and also there's the shoulder season in the Northern Hemisphere, which is quite attractive now to the cruise companies. So the majority of the cruise lines are deciding to stay in our summer and head through to the Northern Hemisphere. So you'll see that 3-season cyclic event. So we won't realistically start to see what I'm anticipating anyway, numbers to start improving until possibly 26, 27 season.
Thank you.
Just on that issue, at the last regional sector meeting, there was a bit of a meeting with the people that had cruise ship interaction. So there's a number of things going on, as Lyndon's mentioned. The having to go the long way around is causing some issues. Another issue that seemed to be of concern was that a lot of the ports have put their charges up considerably, and that's making it a wee bit marginal too. and also, I guess, uncertainty about Milford was another factor within that equation. So numbers are down on what they have been. I'd be interested just as those factors are progress.
Affects our budget.
I was next on the question list, but I've got Paul and Peter coming. So look, I had a ring in the last week from a member of the Fiordland Guardians who was very complimentary about our biosecurity team. So it's always good to get that sort of feedback. I have passed it on, but I'd like to publicly mention that they were very complimentary about our team, and they worked together, and we've had some pretty good successes within Derry, etc. So well done, guys. I see on the water and land plan, it says that there's one party has opposed the appeal. Do we know which party? It's got to be one of two parties, I'd imagine. Forest and Bird.
Mr. Chairman, I probably have a couple of questions to do with Lyndon's previous item. I just wonder if we could.
Okay, well, we'll take Paul. We'll go to Paul and then yourself.
Thank you, Chair, through you, Chair. Lyndon, on page 68, we've got written here that we had a meeting with District Council, Martin Conservation Community Group, myself as well, and yourself. And personally, over the Christmas New Year season, I think the behaviour on the beach was a lot better. But I would wonder, is it possible for us to call a meeting with all those groups again to review what we learned from that, and if there is anything else that we can do? Because I think at one occasion I saw a motorised boat on the beach and going in and out. So it'd be good to be able to get a review if we could. Do you think we can call that meeting, or do you think it'd be best if we left that with Southern District Council?
Coincidentally, I organised a meeting with Southern District Council yesterday.
Can I be included again? Have you already done?
Sure. Well, I asked for a catch up, and it was myself, the new regulatory general manager for SDC, Adrian Humphreys, and John Lucas from DOC. The three groups, we sat around and we discussed Christmas time and the need to preserve that passive recreation area there. Now, bearing in mind those signs all along Stevens Beach were put in by the District Council, but there's no legislation behind it. There's nothing in our bylaws that enables myself to be able to tell those vessels that are parked on the beach there to get out of there. But it's at the moment it's more of an education role that we're playing to try and create a safe area for the community. Now there is huge interest from the community. We have the bylaws that are up for review. They're currently being reviewed at the moment, and I would like to see something go in the bylaws as a proposal to around that passive recreation area, but also making implementing a swim safe area 100 metres out from the shore for no vessels, but just strictly for swimmers or whoever goes in there. Because currently that's not there.
Totally agree. Okay, so just to continue on, it'd be good to maybe I could sit down with the community board or the swimming group and just check to see what their thoughts are on the review.
Great. I was on duty over the Christmas period in Tiana, and quite a number of people off the beach, and I unfairly copped a bit of criticism on the Tiana community Facebook page, because they think I should be parked off the beach there 24/7, but it's not the case. I have a lot of other work out there to do. I can only do what I can do.
Exactly.
But it's very positive moving forward, and how we're working with the community to create a safe space there.
Thank you.
Peter.
Yeah, just, I was fascinated to hear talk about the cruise ships on a 3-year rotation, so to speak. Is that just the visibility of the bookings, or is that a theme that happens every 3 years? Just a general comment too, the changes that we make here in the fees and charges that we incrementally increase, is that a factor, or is it more around them positioning their assets in the best paying place, or maybe probably closer to their markets in the Northern Hemisphere? But remembering where we live in the world, we're in the very bottom. So just a general comment on that, would be good to, so I could understand that a bit better.
Generally, it is 3 seasons in advance. I'm taking bookings at the moment for 26, 27. In terms of the fees, it's a huge consideration, but thankfully, as part of our annual deed of agreement meetings with the cruise industry, we've signalled well in advance when the cap is being removed incrementally, and that was agreed upon during the deed of agreement review a couple of years ago, but also CPI adjustments as well every 2 years, which we're coming into the next cycle this year. And that'll be on the agenda in May with the cruise industry, just to talk about those discussions. So I think it's more the other ports that are actually really raising their port costs and fees, not so much ourselves.
Excellent.
We've got Morris, Phil and Jeremy. Morris.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I did have some other questions, but they've mostly been answered by others, so I will pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Morris. Phil.
Just 2 questions. One was around the catchment science summaries and when we expect they might be available to the public for the 11 that have been delivered. How far from making those publicly available?
So through you, Chairman, you might recall the catchment science summaries are a distillation of a whole lot of freshwater reports, and we have a freshwater item coming through to Stratton Hole, which has those freshwater reports all sitting in behind. So it's coming through very shortly. The Stratton Hole meeting has just been moved to the 24th of February.
So it depends on approval at that meeting to then make them publicly available. Is that how it works, or?
So they will come through. Karen, can you just see what we've got? I know they're sitting in as part of the wider package, and they will essentially become publicly available
when the agenda goes out. It's normally when that material becomes publicly available, and they're currently sitting as PDFs that are uploaded on the website.
So
PDFs.
this month, essentially. Okay.
And thank you to the councillors that have provided some feedback already, and welcome any other feedback.
So the second one was on the approach we've taken to date on the compliance of synthetic nitrogen exceedants. And I was just wanting to know, is that going to be a persistent approach, or is that a transition approach as that rule becomes more familiar with farmers?
You, Chair, that is a transition approach and is in recognition of the horrific display that we had, and we had become aware of significant concerns through councillors that fertiliser agents were raising around the mental health out there at the moment, and a real worry from farmers that they're going to get caught by this, and that we're going to have quite a punitive approach. So the compliance team went through with something that was much more appropriate, recognising the situation in the current context.
Sure. I'll carry on from Councillor Morrison. So I had a question in regards to that. Have we had many, we've asked for them to contact us in regards to if they're going to exceed. And I'm just, I know being a farmer and with a number of farmers, it was pretty tough. But there are a lot of farmers out there that'll be, be viewing this, that they don't use the nitrogen for their farming operation. So we've got to be very careful that we go, oh, it was just a bad year, they can do it. And I know there's mental stress, business is mental stress all the time. And it was exceptionally bad, but there's a reason for them putting this nitrogen on. It's very clear. It's intensity and there's issues. So have we had much engagement, or is this going to be at the end all of a sudden here's the numbers? We're going to be left with a bit of a shock at the end when we have to report, when farmers have to report it. So I'm just teasing it out. I said we've got to be careful because there is a big part of the population that say, hey, this isn't good too. So I was just asking, has there been much engagement now? That's probably what I'm asking.
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that, so I will have to check with Donna. She's on leave today. I'll get back to you. But to your earlier point as part of the question, that's why it is done on a case-by-case basis, and we do go back and look at the history as well, so that we can understand, is this a one-off that, there is something that requires a more understanding approach, or alternatively, actually, is there a pattern there? And so therefore it needs to be a more serious conversation. And I can come back with the answer to the question about the level of engagement that we have had.
Okay, got another question, sorry. Just in regards to the Enviro schools, or the education, if we go back, I just noticed it was one of my local schools. Do we get the option to be involved in those? I don't know, I was looking back, I said we didn't. Some of those are actually quite good engaging to support the staff and those sort of things. And
Normally
I know it has been in the
goes.
past, but I see one in Waikaka, which is right on the doorstep.
Yeah, usually they're in my update on it every week. That we
Yeah, I was
when
going
coming
back on
up.
the old diaries, there was nothing. Yeah, okay. It was just something that we just need to keep a heads up.
Yeah,
Some of us
just make
councillors
sure.
like to be involved in those.
Exactly, no, it's our intention
those.
that you know every week that there's something coming up.
Oh, good. Can't forget Waikaka.
John.
Yeah, just supporting Jeremy's point around, we are all responsible for managing our way through it. And just a question to you, Chair, has there been any contact by industry groups within council externally, other than individual farmers around this?
Yes, Federated Farmers did approach me, and basically staff said that there's not going to be some carte blanche for all that individual cases. And I guess we're all looking at mental health, we're actually looking at animal welfare. So some people have made some bad decisions earlier in the season, but also I think as you heard from Hayley, is this a one-off? How are you going to rectify the situation? I think that's the right way to handle it. And it's not my role. I think staff have been handling it well. So you're not, people are doing it, staying within the rule. You don't want to just have everybody turn up and say we can do something different. But this is quite, the spring we've had has been unusual, and there's been some decisions made that were probably poor. But I think our staff are saying, look, how are we going to rectify this next year? And I'm not sure we've had, well, I think we'd know if there'd been a lot of applications, but yeah.
Thank you.
And one thing I was on the back of Lyndall mentioning air quality and nothing much actually happening. We've sort of said for a while, why don't we approach the territorials about biowater? We know it's not the whole answer, but if you had to upgrade your heating device at the point of sale, it's actually not. It's a pretty simple way of actually getting more things doing. I recommend we actually do make that approach. We've talked about it, but have we actually walked the walk to see whether there's we know the health issues of not improving air quality. If we're not going to get PM2 for a while, that's one practical thing we could be doing. We know that the loan scheme has pretty much run its course, but that would be quite a positive thing. On your average, I think about every 7 years, houses change hands, so it's a painless way of actually getting some improvement.
Mr. Chairman, if I can come in, I was involved in the air plan hearing way back now, about 7 years ago, and it was discussed. And if I recall right, I could be wrong, but the science advice wasn't particularly helpful or useful thing to do. Otherwise, it would have been put in place then because it was debated very thoroughly at that time. So
From memory, Morris, it was, it would help, but it wasn't going to be the large help. But after 7 years, I'm thinking if it's some help, we should probably make that
well, that's right. Although, you know, there are lots of arguments for and against it. I'm just saying that that was debated very thoroughly at the time and wasn't considered to be something that was particularly helpful for some reason. I can't remember the details, but maybe we should look at it again.
Thanks for that, Morris. Any further questions on the report? Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just seeing at the bottom of page 66 under integrated catchment management partnerships, and specifically the Bluff Hall facility. Since it's under the heading of partnerships, I do assume that that is a partnership that work, and it says staff are currently reviewing the findings of the report and considering the next step options. Is that together with our partners on this project, namely the Invercargill City Council?
Very good question. Really much through Mr. Chair. We put together a needs analysis to understand what the actual need is out there and the scope of that need. That was done internally from us. Hasn't involved wider public yet, though part of that was through Southport and through Ordinary Guardians. They participated in that analysis, and we're just currently going through the findings of that as to where do we take this from here. But that's a discussion we haven't quite got to where that goes with other partners.
Other partners would be the Invercargill City Council. That's where the original dealings were when this was proposed, this project.
ICC, Southport, possibly one in the
Memory on that, there was a potential funding source. Was it through MBU?
Kanoa funding. I think we that's one of the options we're looking at.
So there was potential.
Further information.
I move we receive the chief executive's very complete report.
Second. Thank you, Neville. Seconded by Lyndall. All in favour, say aye. We'll move to item 10.2, rating review confirmation of options for consultation.
Thank you, Chair. We have some staff on leave this week, so Phil and myself will cover this one. Essentially what this is doing is seeking formal council approval around the three options that have been developed up and workshopped with yourselves last year and then came through in the summer reading pack to inform engagement with the community over the next couple of months. So they all comprise of both informal type engagement at a community events, etc., which we'll talk about in a moment, and then the formal consultation in accordance with our special consultative procedure will be April. So you will recall that there was the phase 1 rating review undertaken alongside last year's long-term plan process, and it was agreed in response to the community feedback that there would be further consultation this financial year around the river management rate in particular, and whether that's a local or regional rate. So the river management activity is in the order of about $3 million per annum, and that is activities such as fairway clearance, erosion control activities, etc. There's a wee bit of a description of that on page 72. And the three options, as you may recall, are essentially the move to a regional rate, the option of a rate based around freshwater management units. So that's not in the sense of the national policy statement for freshwater management. That's just a way of grouping together river catchments, and having a more local rate. And then there is essentially a deferral option, which is what we've done this year one, but extending that for a further year. So some of the risks and opportunities or pros and cons of each option are in the table, and we had some very good feedback from councillors about what you saw as some of the pros and cons as well, which will inform the process going forward. Essentially just seeking approval to move on with that next step, and Phil just handed out the materials that we will in that community events in the next wee while.
Yeah, we've just started with event season underway already with the AMP shows. We've attended a couple of the AMP shows. This is a poster we've been using, which is obviously really reasonably generic because we didn't want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of decisions made around the table. So we've been to Winton and Gawler. And obviously we can tailor it a bit more once we've got the steer from the council today. We've got a comms and engagement plan that's ready to go. And yeah, essentially, initially that engagement period where we're going to events, so both community-wide and then more targeted meetings with the likes of the catchment liaison committees, and then zeroing on the consultation options in April, when we will get it as a formal consultation as such on the website, and be asking people for their feedback.
So just to be really clear, we're not asking council to decide a preferred option today, just to move on with the consultation and their engagement.
Peter, John and Lyndall.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Very good. I just would really urge, with this complexity in the questions and what we put the community, try and find a way through that. Some of the things we talk about at this table, we're very familiar with them, and we can just walk outside and think that everyone else should be too. But it is a generational change. We need to highlight exactly why we're proposing this. And it says, how do we fund river management? A lot of people would see that headline and say, well, just like we always have. But why are we proposing this change? It has to be really clear how we're shifting to another works phase in regards to river management and climate resilience. It needs to be really clear, and I'll just re-emphasise wherever you think it could be complexity, try and take that out. Have that background information sitting there. Some people like the complex stuff. So look forward to it.
John.
Thank you, Chair. I guess just thinking back to our property, I guess I'm looking at option 3 there. My understanding was that through the consultation was with land, it's a 2-year transition. That was the wording I understood. So I guess I'm looking at this going, are we litigating some decision, or what are we opening this crack in the door a little bit? But I think a lot of the options still sitting.
Right, so some comfort around option 3. The rationale really behind that option is just to maintain the status quo for another year while further work's done around the river management program. And team would be happy to speak a bit about some of the thinking that's happening in that space, but also whilst further work is done around the catchment liaison committees and their role in this going forward as well. So that was some of the rationale behind that option, but the regional rate is the one that I guess is in line with where we've gone with our other activities such as the flood infrastructure investment. The FMU rate is sort of the halfway house between past and that approach.
Yes, so something to understand that just is more around the capital value rate. I thought we had specific, quite strong agreement on that.
So you'd like us potentially to take that option?
I just think it's a discussion that I think we need to link back to what was agreed on. Look in the minutes of the LTP, to be honest, I think.
Good point. Lyndall.
Thanks, Chairman. Just wanted to ask the face-to-face information, etc., bullet point, if there's just a page of FAQs, as they call them, for us all, because sometimes it's not front of mind when you're munching on your hot dog or whatever, you bottle of chips.
you know, being able to whip out that kind of FAQ sheet, and so that we're all singing from the same song sheet per se, might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just finalising that at the moment. So
Right.
Trying to get that through, and today will be really good for us.
Yeah, great, because there'll be, there's some more opportunities for discussion. Thank
I'll
you.
move the recommendation. I've got several more to come. I've got Jeremy, Morris and myself.
Just to be clear, obviously the FME rate, I was just looking, is that almost a differential? Or is it differentials off the table totally? And I know we're talking, this is river management, and then we've got flood infrastructure, two discussions.
So through you, Chair, 70% of the works in any given area would be funded through the general rate and for capital value. But then 30% of the works would be funded by targeted rate for that particular freshwater management unit, and that would also be capital value. So it's all shifting to capital value, and there's some local share, I guess, is the approach that has been taken with that particular option.
It's not differential as such. I know they're trying to push against it. That discussion is that being done? Or is it could people come back through this process to ask?
They can, yeah, that's the purpose of the consultation and engagement.
That's what I'm just saying. But we're not promoting any differential. Or
that's not specifically in this list of options.
Morris, then myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know in the past our consultation on these matters have been really focused on, or focused might not be quite the right word, on the catchment liaison committees. And they have provided the greatest feedback, but they are really only a small proportion of the total population of South. And I know you've got 7 or 8 points here of how to consult with people. And it is hard to consult and to engage with people in the city because they don't have the groups like the Catchment Liaison Group. But I would hope that we are not, that the feedback is not dominated by the Catchment Liaison Committees. I hope that it is evenly spread out over the whole community. And I guess your challenge is to try and engage with those people who are not in Catchment Liaison Committees so that we do get a wider feedback on the whole community.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we've got some, we're looking at doing some pop-ups in the likes of Macau Central, so we can, and, obviously covering our bases in terms of audiences there. And I think it's a good point which Councillor McDonald talked about, that is the surface conversation around the general regional versus targeted, and then the more in-depth conversation around what exactly that involves. I think what we sort of discovered on Saturday Gore is that a lot of people at that very superficial level, and even some people who maybe were paying catchment rates said they would have to go and look at their bill to know what exactly they were paying. So yeah, I think it's already given us some good insights as to the level of knowledge that people have around that. So certainly trying to cover our bases and across different mediums as well.
Thank you. I guess my opinion is that we do go ahead with either one or two. We might, I think, the opportunity to get rid of 140 quite complex things. I think we make that decision. If you leave it, it might never be done. It was sort of one of the actions that we've tried to do for the last few years. I'm probably at the moment thinking the halfway house of the of option 2. There's some of the groups are worried about transparency. It's still a move to capital rate. I think we should go ahead with that. But do we have the halfway house where there's still 30% that's on a catchment basis rather than one size fits all? You may eventually go there, but at the moment I think we get suspicion that if it's all in one pot, the visibility won't be there, which is probably wrong, but it's I think it's still a point worth noting.
Chairman, given that the recommendation is just is to put these questions out for consultation, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. I'm happy to see that.
Moved and seconded, any further discussion? I'll put the motion, or
Sorry, look. I think most of this. Option two should be. Should be considered, and option three is going to complicate things and confuse people.
Aren't we just,
Are you?
yeah, so you're saying that recommendation 2 would be approved 2 options for river management?
Can I move to that effect?
So Morris is moving an amendment that the second recommendation would be to approve 2 options rather than 3. Essentially, a reasonable consensus that we don't want to stay with.
I have to second
Moved and seconded, any discussion on that amendment?
I thought we'd already workshopped this situation, Chairman, and we came up with these 3 options. And we need to be open and fair to the people in our community and give them the opportunity to feedback. You know, they want to keep the status quo, or do we do something different? I don't see a need to change this. I think we need to continue the way we have and give them that opportunity to comment.
Which is a fair point, but I guess most people don't actually understand the current complexity. It's actually, it's all over the place, but we could leave it in there, but I think Morris makes probably quite a good point. Does it just confuse people with feedback? But there's an amendment, we'll be moved and seconded, it'll either fail or it'll, so I will put the amendment, which is 2 rather than 3. All in favour of that, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And against? 6. So the amendment is carried. So the amendment becomes the recommendation. So we'll now put the
Just a matter of clarification before we get to the next bit. Since you've removed an option conversation, there needs to be some way for the community to say what they think other than the 2 matters that are put in front of them. So before we vote on the next bit, there does need to be some form of other commentary that we can ask for. And that also speaks to Jeremy's point earlier that he wants to make other commentary. So that may also include the fact that people are happy with the halfway house that we went to in the first year of the LTP. So it is going to be difficult not to refer in conversation what other might look like. So I just want to be clear that while we are not proposing as though it sounds like these are the only options, there does need to be a capacity for people to provide their thoughts other than the 2 options.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some encouragement of that. Is council satisfied with that as there being still 3 matters to go? 1, 2, and there needs to be any other options.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I was just going to say that again, that we extended it another year through the long-term plan. So but we said we wanted to conclude this in the 2nd year. Option 3 is saying delay it for a further year, and I think we're giving the public another year to feel their way with it. So,
but we just removed that.
But yeah, so we're definitely removing the current, because I don't think I want to delay it for a year, as we said in the long-term plan. But also, that was my suggestion, through a consultation process, anybody can make suggestions. We've got to have that forum where, you know, you can assess them.
So any other,
clearly
any other
what you're saying.
That allows people who might say that
we're not preparing and we'll make that. We need to clarify and get it.
Issues like Stead Street, etc. Some people will say, well, actually, there should be a differential or a targeted rate that would fall within the other.
Yeah.
Jan, do you know where we are on the recommendations?
Yes, you're about to put the amendment.
Yeah.
Which was that you approved the 2 options for river management rating, community engagement as a regional rate and freshwater management unit.
I think we voted on the amendment.
Yeah.
And that was
The
approved.
amendment became the motion. You're about to put that.
So now we're putting the recommendation with the new motion.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman,
So
but
the
the new,
conversation we've just had, is that captured here?
the new motion doesn't include the opportunity for another.
I think it needs to be amended again if we want to get the process right. Which is the two, and I would move that amendment, that two options and include a third other comment.
So I'm happy for it to say the two options, because I think these are two
Yep.
specific options for remuneration for community engagement, acknowledging that the public can provide other options.
Yes.
Okay, we.
I'll second that amendment.
Another amendment that I need to go. So
It
I'll
needs
put
to be
that-
put to the meeting.
So I think we're right to actually go with the three now. So I'll put the amended motions. So the amendments were 3 to 2 and item 3, which is other concerns.
Dan, did you write something? Do you want to read it?
Acknowledging the public may provide other options.
Cool.
The wording, I'll put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against? No, carried.
Thank you.
So you need to put the motion as amended.
Motion.
That wasn't.
No, that was the
No, that was the
Oh, just
second
the amendment.
amendment.
Okay, now you're going to vote.
Yes, now we vote on the on the substantive
Okay,
motion.
the amendment becomes the motion. I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye.
Aye. I'm happy to have moved, seconded. Whatever that was.
Normally we just put the motion in. I agree, I think we might have overdone it, but anyway, that's right, let's be clear.
Okay, we will move to 10.3, enhancing informal representation for School of Highland Review.
I'll take the paper as read, but as brief summary, just further to the representation review that was undertaken last year. We undertook to explore further opportunities to provide or explore representation with the residents of Stewart Island. So the paper outlines various options for that and proposes through that you may wish to consider liaison councillor role for that community. There's a draft job description there. There's an opportunity to consider appointing someone at the the next triennium when you consider your various committees and roles, but there may be the opportunity to explore what you would like to do for the remainder of this triennium. And there are also other options that have been outlined there should you elect not to do that we could look at doing for you. For example, just enhance communications in some way, shape or form.
Thank you for that, Amy. Lyndall.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I'm not completely convinced that this is the best option. But having said that, the Invercargill Rakiura representative councillors, you know, are listed and able to be contacted. So that, you know, and personally, I'm on the island, you know, infrequently, but at least, you know, a couple of times a year. And so I don't mean to be disrespectful at all, but you know, this is a two-way conversation, and the constituents are able to contact any one of us actually, but in particular the Invercargill Rakiura councillors. So that aside, I completely understand that a conduit might make it easier and more efficient, which is great, and that's my concern, is the mechanism for how that might be implemented, and I guess we can nut that out later. And it would be a really nice opportunity to work together with our Southland District Council colleagues, you know, dovetailing with their community board meetings and perhaps having a sidebar meeting dedicated to only Environment Southland topics rather than imposing ourselves on their community board meetings, but if they're all there, then we might as well talk to them. So I think there's actually quite a lot to, I think, consider in this conversation. It's not just about, oh, well, you know, councillor so-and-so can be the one and they get a couple of trips to Stewart Island, Rakiura every year or whatever. I think there's more to it than that. So appreciate that perhaps there's a need for better conduit for those conversations. Yeah, I'm not convinced. I need to see a mechanism for how it will actually work. But having said that, if we wanted to temporarily do that till the end of the triennium and see how it goes, no harm in doing that either. Thanks.
Well, look, in some ways, I think we're almost jumping the gun with the electoral commission meeting. What they decide, they may make some changes. We can't, but they could. I'm attracted to the idea of perhaps several of us attending a community board meeting and having a conversation about what the community would actually like for the interim. Obviously, next term there's the ability to decide or not decide to have a specific representative, but that's for the future. But I think because their guidance was a wee bit vague, they actually wanted to be attached to Western, which was unusual choice when we thought maybe something else. But until the commissioners actually make that final decision, they may make no decisions. But I think it would actually be good to actually go and schedule a community board meeting.
Can I just clarify a matter for you? The matters before the local government commission do not include a Rakiura representation. It was about the number of Invercargill city-based representatives. So this was just simply a matter about how to respond to a matter that got raised during that process, in which there was an opportunity for enhanced communication of some kind. And the question is, which is your preferred way of doing that? A liaison council is only one of the options, but if you want to do something that is more deliberate and more connected, we're very happy to take that direction from you and to address that matter. And as Councillor Ludlow says, I mean, if you do want to actually liaison council, then maybe there's a good trial in the lead up to the election, or just simply that we have a very structured and more formal way of actually ensuring that we're connected to Rakiura better.
Paul, were you indicating before?
Yes, definitely. So that's exactly where I was going to head. This was raised during the submissions with regards to everything else. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it is part of Rakiura and Rakiura councillors. If Stewart Island, the residents of Stewart Island don't feel like they're being representative, then we need to behoove and send councillors, councillor or whatever over there. It's very similar if someone in Milford Sound decided to rather talk to someone from West. It's part, we don't need to move lines, we just need to work out whether Stewart Island's being represented well enough, and any improvement on that is good.
Neville?
Yeah, Jim, I've been just counting up the number of people from Stewart Island who recently talked to me about stuff. There's 5 anyway who I would class as probably leading citizens over there, community board members, and they're very pleased with their position on the Southland District Council because they have their own representation there, and that's what drove this submission to us. I just point out that the 5 of us here are all responsible in part to Stewart Island, and if we haven't fulfilled that, then that's an individual issue, I think. I actually quite like the idea of having a councillor tasked with taking a particular interest in Stewart Island. But I've suggested to these people that they just need to invite us. If they've got issues that they want to discuss, invite us to your community board meetings, or even a special meeting if you think it's necessary, and we'll come. It hasn't happened.
Yeah, largely been said, but I've represented Stewart Island various things, and they certainly feel neglected, whether they are neglected to the matter in which they feel it. But just talking recently to some Stewart Island people about an interest, they could tell me quite specifically what their rates were in relation to everybody else and how often they saw people. So I think we've got to step up what we actually do. When I was an MP, I certainly clearly got the message that they were neglected, and I held clinics down there every 6 weeks, and it was very seldom anybody came, but they loved me going and showing that we loved them, and I think there's probably a little element of that in it rather than total neglect. It is just they do pay rates, they want to see people, they want to know that if there is an issue, they have a mechanism to have it dealt with.
Well,
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if anyone's already thought about this, but if we were to dedicate a particular councillor to Stewart Island, they would enjoy an advantage, unfair advantage when it comes to election time, I would imagine, and I would think that there would be objections to that. Whether it's real or imagined, I think it's not fair.
Morris.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I personally think that the status quo is the best thing to do here, possibly followed by enhanced communication. On the table on page 81 sets out the pros and cons of each option. And if you think about this, I thought about this and think, well, if Rakiura wants more attention, why don't we provide more attention to Winton, for example, or a Tautau or Tuatapere, and they've all got their own issues, and there are more people in those places than there are in Rakiura. So I think that really no particular change is needed, except perhaps the staff could ensure that communications go out, they get them, and they've got opportunities like everybody else has.
Alistair.
Look, it's real simple. 400 people, we represent 8,000 now, each in our constituencies, 5% of the time. Now, if they get more than that, they're getting a better deal. So let the people in Rakiura area deal with it. We don't need to spend time on it.
Neville.
Yeah, I agree with Morris, Chairman. I think the status quo until after the election, and the new council can decide whether they want to have a specific allocation of the council with Stewart Island interests.
Which was fine. I still think from a communication point of view, it wouldn't hurt perhaps one or two of us go to a meeting, bring feedback.
Just really quickly on that, I've spoken to the SDC Community Board representative many times, and she said, just come with me. So we can do that if you want.
Wilma.
So can I just make a brief observation, because I think that to Robert's point, which I think is quite valid, is that the other seats have either got one representative or two. The liaison between you in terms of representation and being seen as probably in an informal way easier to manage than 6 councillors around, knowing amongst each other who's going to something and how you do that. I mean, this may be something that we can help with as staff in relation to the communication, is to actually assist with some level of coordination amongst the 6 of you who are Invercargill and Rakiura representatives, just so that you actually know if you are going, or that you've got a mechanism to talk to each other about that, so that it's not all or nothing or one person. And so I don't know, Amy, are you thinking that that's actually a feasible way through for Dem Services to support?
Yeah,
because I think it is a slightly more unique situation.
Look, I do, and the big thing I think that potentially makes Stewart Island a bit different is the big blue bit in between the 2 green bits, which just make that accessibility slightly more difficult than it is for anybody else in a land-based transport situation. So I think the problem potentially is still the problem, but how you solve that problem then is the one about coordination between your fine selves, and also and it's a question back to you, and we can support that with thinking about how we might do the enhanced communication
I
Is
think
that
that
is
seems
that
to
what
be
I'm
the
hearing in
direction.
terms of direction?
It is quite an aberration when you've got, it's territorial, it's South and District, but for, Environment South, and it's in Chicago, which I guess muddies the water a bit. But Peter, did you have one more?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, look, sometimes when it's everybody's responsibility, no one takes responsibility. So I just wonder too, we shouldn't just talk about the community board. There's a whole grouping of environmental groups there. You've got the dock offices there. I would think one of our councils would go and have a meeting, the relevant people there. There's a predator-free group. So we've got quite a broad range of things that could be set up there on any given day for someone to go over it and just learn it.
I think we've got some more reasonably decent steer.
Recommendation as well.
Was to provide direction as to the approach.
I think we've provided direction to staff.
I'll move the recommendations.
Second that.
Moved by Lyndall, seconded by John. All in favour will say aye. Right, 10.4, appointment and remuneration of directors or trustees for council organisations. In your hands.
The council currently has a policy on the appointment and remuneration of directors of council organisations. It was last reviewed in February 2009 and therefore is overdue for review. I have prepared for your consideration a replacement policy and have also included the current policy. And in my paper, I've set out the key changes just to explain the direction to you. So I suggest to just take the paper and policy as read and happy to answer any questions.
Let's see the qualification. Did you mean to say 2019?
That was when it was last reviewed.
From 2009.
Oh, 2019, sorry.
It's not that old.
Lyndall.
Thanks, Chairman. Two things. On page 85, under the personal attributes, and this might be unnecessarily detailed, but is an understanding of governance sufficient, or would we prefer demonstrated experience with demonstrated understanding? Do you know what I mean? Because I can say I've got an understanding, but that might be unnecessary detail. It just came to mind. Second thing was on page 93, there's reference to the South and Heritage Building and Preservation Trust.
That's in the current policy.
Yeah, right. So I was just checking that was, that's not on the new one, is it? No, that's all right. Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to make an amendment to make that into demonstrated experience of governance.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments on the draft proposed policy?
I'll move the recommendations, Chairman.
Moved by Morris. Seconded by Ford. What's the recommendation? All in favour say aye. Aye. 10.5, retrospective approval for past submissions.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Kia ora, councillors. This report seeks retrospective approval for a number of submissions that have been lodged through the January period. It's been a bit of a busy onslaught of reform and submissions requested from government. We're looking to continue through February and through the rest of the quarter. So the three submissions we've got to approval for the Environment Southland submission on the proposed amendments to the Biosecurity Act 1993. The second one is the Treaty Principles of Treaty Waitangi Bill, and also the proposed regulatory standards bill. So there's been a couple of workshops with council to look through the content of them. So this is really just an opportunity to formally accept those submissions.
Any questions on any of those submissions we've made?
Well, given that we've already workshopped them and we've sent them, Madam Chairman, I move that we approve them. In due respect.
And well done. Well done, councillors. Thank you.
We've got a motion to.
Morris, did you second that, Morris?
Seconded by Morris. Any further discussion? Put the recommendation, all in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Thanks.
Just in the report, Marcus. Sorry, should have said that before, page 95. Refer to amendments of Biosecurity Act 1991.
But it's not in the submission.
It's been referred to elsewhere.
That's the submission refers to it. I think the submission is okay though, isn't it? It's not. Yes, it's not in the report.
It's not part of the deal.
Yeah,
It's just
no, thank you.
Right, we'll move to 10.6, local elections 2025 timetable. Order of candidates' names and other matters. Amy, would you like to?
To my colleague, colleague Paula. So firstly, I'd just actually like to note the report as it's read, and the fact that we need to make a decision around the order of candidates' names on voting papers. If we don't make a decision on this, the order actually just defaults to alphabetical. So we've given you the options around the different orders, and we've given you a list of pros and cons to each different order to help you make a decision. Also within the report, there are actually other updates around process for the elections for 2025 with some key dates around process that will actually affect the elections, being nominations open, nominations closing, public notices of the candidates, and when the actual election finishes, which is Saturday, the 11th of October at noon. So I'd like you to consider the order that names need to be on voting papers.
I think one of the things that just draw attention to is on page 141, you'll see that there's been a shift in what other councils have been doing over the last few years as well. You know, moving from alphabetical order to more randomised as well. Not that that necessarily has to influence your decision making at all, but it's just interesting to note the change there.
Well, what are currently?
Random.
Random, yeah, with or pseudo, is it?
No, just
random. We've got Eric, Lyndall, Morris. Eric.
Yeah, thank you. We did have this debate 3 years ago and we opted to go random, I think, for the first time. And we're just in keeping with what generally happens now, including the general election, which is random. And I just think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that's the fairest way to conduct the process. So I would suggest that we opt with what we did last time, which is option C. And at the state of discussion, I'm happy to move that.
And I'll second that.
Wait a second, I've got a couple of others we're going to speak, which still can. Lyndall?
Yes, I'd speak in favour of that actually. My preference is for random. I think we need to give the constituents some credit about being able to find people's names on the list.
Morris? And I think, but it is a good point. It would be quite good to liaise with the territorials because if you're going into a vote, it would be good that they're all the same. But at least they know that's what we've done. I'm trying to remember, did the territorials vote for that last time or not? I can't remember.
So the other territorials in the region are heading towards a random order.
Okay.
So ICC and Southern District have made that decision and Gore are yet to decide.
On that basis, I think we're getting pretty clear direction on that. Did we have a motion?
Yeah, I moved.
And I think Neville seconded. No further discussion. I'll put the recommendation, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? No.
Thank you.
Okay, 10.7, reporting council expenditure occurred above delegated authority.
I'll just have the papers read.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
I'll move it.
pretty straightforward.
Move the recommendation. Second.
Moved and seconded, any further discussion?
Alistair wants to
Alistair,
discuss.
Alistair.
Alison?
It's all within budget, isn't it? Yes?
Yes.
It's just exceeded the 300.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
I keep that in mind.
We've moved and seconded, no further discussion, I'll put the recommendation, all in favour say aye. Right, we'll move to 10.8, council attendance at the New Zealand Planning Institute National Conference.
This is just providing an opportunity for councillors interested to attend a conference that is actually being held locally in Invercargill, and they extended the invite out to a specific councillor-only session.
Lyndall.
As, chair of the Strategy and Policy Committee, that's within my work stream, so I'd quite like to go to the councillor only sessions, please.
That's a good idea.
I attended one in Wellington in the first term, they're quite interesting. The fact that it's in Invercargill, I think it's an opportunity.
One of our own staff has had a lot to do with our own staff. And what they've been organising. They're on part of the committee. Yeah.
Chairman, I'd like to attend to it, possible.
Have we got a limit on how many, is there one person then observers, or what's how's this work?
There are no limits. The invitation has been extended out to interested
Oh.
councillors.
All of you may go.
We may all go.
There will be a registration that needs to be covered, so they'll need to know you're coming. So we need to appoint you.
Phil?
I'll put my name forward, find out what's in the vision.
For the random councillor, randomised councillor.
Well, I'm assuming it'll be over at least 2 days.
1 day.
Council session.
Councillor sessions 1 day.
Coming to you because there's a cost associated with that, so you need to make a decision.
Oh, we can.
Is it expensive?
It's in the paper, councillor.
It's $200 to register.
200 per person to register.
Right, so is that for the full conference, Jan, or just for?
No, that's for
Just for the day.
I just lost count of the councillors who put their hand up, Chairman, but I.
3 so far,
Three.
Ludlow, Morrison and
Well, the attendance, I'll comment on that. The expenses are paid.
Moved, seconder. Yeah, Currently, any further discussion? The recommendation that those 3 attend the council today, all in favour say aye. All aye. Right, we'll move to 10.9, attendance at the local government New Zealand zone 5 and 6. That's on the 10th and 11th of April. It's at,
It's at the Novotel in Christchurch at the airport hotel. Yes. The program isn't out yet, but they are compiling it and aiming to have a number of ministers attend. So that's all I can tell you.
Put names to the registrations at this point.
Yes.
Well, we kind of, the accommodation people are chasing me to get their names. I've got accommodation held.
So if because I'm interested in going, but I want to see the program first, because it might be.
My experience is the program comes out very late in the day.
Yeah, and they're usually relevant, but if there's a person booked, is it easy to change the name?
On the registration it will be, yes. Yes, we'll be able to substitute registration. Yeah, and it will be travel. Oh, the
Yeah.
hotel would be okay. At the moment, on the roll and just ESA.
How many are we?
There'll be flights would be we book them fully flexible.
I'm interested in going.
We'd normally have 2 or 3 would go, I guess, I'm probably.
I'll be in the one, John.
Might come on as full, mate.
I'm going on my own.
I'll put my hand up, but Linda was putting her hand up. Any further advances? Not, would somebody like to move that, moved by John, seconded by Paul. Put that recommendation that Linda and myself attend the zoning conference. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to 10.10, councillor diary update to February.
You're right, there are a number of requests for leave of absence. I don't know if there are any more to be raised that need to be considered.
You're not allowed
He's got
any more,
seven.
you've hit your quota.
Yes, pretty much all of April, please, first to 30th. Pencil, not confirmed, but yeah, it doesn't block.
And I'll need to officially amend my leave. It's actually the 9th to the 20th of March, not the 17th. Any further advances for leave? Any additions or alterations to the meeting schedule?
The formal meeting schedule has been altered today to change the Strategy and Policy Committee and Regulatory Committee meetings from their scheduled date of the 19th of February to Monday, the 24th of February, and on Wednesday, the 19th of February, the council strategy session.
We're going to
There's regulatory change to that date as well.
Yes, both meetings. I have updated the electronic calendars, and so hopefully with everybody being in here.
Noted.
Yes, thank you, Jen. Good job.
Very smart of you. Blocks, out of the blocks.
Okay, there's no further alterations for somebody
I'll
like
move
that.
the council subject to those alterations.
I second that.
Moved and seconded, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
So that will move us to public excluded, again, will give us the reasons for.
We're going into public excluded to confirm the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council to adopt the resolutions to the investment committee meeting on the 20th of November and for the risk insurance committee meeting on the 11th of December, and to deal with motion 12.1 delegation to chief executive to lodge submissions on government reform and fast track consent applications. The grounds for moving into public excluded are set out in the meeting agenda on pages 160 and 161.
Have you heard the reasons? Would somebody like to move? We move in public excluded. Moved by Mara, seconded by Jeremy. In favour say aye. Aye. I'll wait for confirmation that we are offline.
It's easy enough.